Hey Shaneef, how are you today?
I'm good. We meet again on the pink couch for our third episode in our podcast.
We sure do. And what's on your mind today?
So today I have a question for you. When you finished using your planted moisturizer, what do you do with the jar?
That's a good question, and we actually get asked that quite a lot. So for me, the first go-to is like, how can I reuse this?
Okay.
So I take the label off the side and the top, and then generally pop it in the dishwasher after
Right.
that to get it nice and clean, because I'm often putting things in there like seeds and nuts and fruit and that kind of stuff to take for lunch. So for me, my go-to is to reuse this, and for that I say thank you.
I love it. It's so on brand. And as a brand, we want our customers to have a long-term relationship with their packaging. Because the reality is that once the ingredients or once the product inside is finished, the story of the packaging doesn't need to end there. It can continue.
Exactly. Think about it more like an afterlife for the product. So what you really should be thinking about is like, what's happening with the jar, what's happening with the lid, what was the box or the packaging that I got it in if I purchased it online, did I take a sample away? Really, we should be thinking about all of those when considering what to do with the products that we're purchasing initially, but then what can we do afterwards once we're done using the product, as you've mentioned.
Right. And as a purpose-driven company, we care not only about what goes onto your skin, but also the decisions that we make around packaging.
Absolutely, because if you haven't guessed already, audience, this episode we're going to be talking about packaging. The beautiful sides of it, the annoying sides of it, what do I do with it after it, side of it. So we're gonna jump right in and take you on a journey around decisions that we've made at Planted, stuff that we see happening out there in the wild, and then what can you as a customer do? And then we're going to end with a little game where we're going to test Shaneef's recycling knowledge, where we'll put things that were found in both of our bathrooms in front of him to determine whether or not it's going to be something that needs to go in the bin, whether it's something that needs to go to a recycling depot, or whether it's something that you can keep at home and give another life to.
Hopefully I know my way around a recycling depot, that I know what to do with those products.
Well, we shall see.
Cool.
We're going to be talking about packaging today and spending a fair bit of time on that when a lot of people don't even think about it at all. They, again, as we mentioned, they care a lot about what's in the jar, what is it going to do for my skin,
Right.
etc. But then afterwards, it's kind of like in the bin. So why is this something that we care a lot about at Planted?
Yes, as a purpose-driven brand, we care about ethical sourcing. We care about regenerative practices, and we care about the effects that the product has on your skin. So Tricia, why did we choose glass and aluminum at Planted?
That's a good question. And so for glass, that was kind of a bit of an easy one. So glass in itself is like infinitely recyclable. So
Okay.
meaning if you put it back into the waste stream, there's a high likelihood that that's going to be turned back into new glass. And you can recycle it many, many, many times, and it still maintains its structure and durability, unlike other lower grade materials that break down so that they eventually end up in waste stream because they're no longer able to be recycled.
Right.
The other thing with glass is that it doesn't leach into the product. So there's never going to be a time where you're going to have anything leach into the product that sits in glass for sometimes very long periods of time. We have a 24-month shelf life, so we're hoping that product's not sitting, in the glass longer than that our customers have enjoyed it before that,
Right.
for that time comes. And also if it does end up in the environment, it's benign. So meaning that it's not going to have a negative impact as it would sit there, whether that be in a landfill or somewhere else in nature. So for choosing it from that perspective, it was really around the reusability, recyclability, and then the durability that it has once it ends up in a recycling stream.
Right.
And same thing goes for aluminum. Aluminum, again, is one of those sort of like super materials. It's highly, highly recyclable. We have lots of systems set up in many cities across Canada and the US that take aluminum quite easily. So from that regard, it just made a lot of sense instead of putting a plastic lid on it,
Right.
because as you know, we set out to be a plastic-free company, but we'll get into some of the challenges that we had around that. And also, it takes 95% less energy to use a recycled piece of aluminum than to mine that from a natural resource perspective, from a virgin perspective.
Okay.
So we know that we're using a material that is quite easily recyclable. It has a long lifespan of staying in the system, and also is something that we don't have to take new materials out of the earth to use if we're purchasing a recycled aluminum lid. So that was the decision making around why we made that choice, because we certainly know there's lots of issues with using plastic. So maybe you can share a little bit with the audience around like how big that issue is.
A recent stat shows that 120 billion units of plastic each year from the beauty industry, and a lot of that is single-use plastics.
Single use, for anyone that doesn't know that terminology, basically it's essentially something that you just open, you use it once, and then it goes into the garbage. So it's not something that you would continue to reuse, because
Right.
there is things made out of plastic, like your shampoo bottle or your big lotion that you use over and over again. So we can talk about that plastic in waste stream, but certainly when we talk about single use, it really is those like, sample sachets, face masks, stuff that's really designed for that just like quick hit, and then
It's gone.
Then it's gone. But also, we're not just seeing it end up in landfill, we're seeing it end up in oceans. We're seeing the plastic break down and form into microplastics. I don't know if anyone's been watching documentaries about plastic these days, but we know that it's actually ending up in the human body. They say a credit card size
Right.
of microplastics now exists in people. We're seeing it in utero, in
It's affecting
babies, in
fertility.
moms. Like, it's affecting fertility. Yeah, there's so many things we could go on and on about the use of plastic. And so for us, that was clear before the 120 billion. We've known about this issue
Right.
for over a decade. So when we were thinking about what to do with packaging at Planted, we were like, well, we don't want to be part of that continued problem, but also the materials that we chose are not perfect.
Agreed. And recently, I had an opportunity to travel back to Mombasa, where as a kid, I grew up in Nairobi, and going to Mombasa for vacation was common, and spending time at the beach. And it holds memory for me. This is where I grew up. And this last visit that I had really took packaging from the abstract into the reality. Because as, walking along the coast, and what I remember as, the sunsets, the warm air, the ocean scent, clean beaches, things have changed. Where the beaches could be pristine, there is plastic and packaging in the surf. And you're seeing less people use the beaches, and all you're seeing is plastics. So, going back, it's a reminder that once we use something and we say goodbye to it, if it's not properly disposed of, it's still in the environment, and it's maybe more in our face than we really think about.
That must have been heartbreaking. And somebody once said, which I believe is to be true, that every piece of plastic that was ever made
Right.
still exists today,
Yeah.
whether it be in its like complete form or like we were just describing in the form
Yeah.
of microplastics. And like we've been pumping out plastic since the 50s. So it's just alarming to think about what the quantity of the problem is out there that exists, and how do we think about bringing those materials back into environment and then reusing them as opposed to continuing to produce virgin plastic.
Right. And what started off as convenience has now turned into a way of life. What we're seeing now is we've become so attached to it, and making decisions that are more ethical or right, we're not always making the right decisions anymore.
But we will also say that there is some trade-offs there. The trade-offs for us being that glass is actually heavy. It's heavy to ship the material, the empty jars to you.
It also
and
breaks.
Then, and then you have to fill it and ship it to your retailers, and then it might have broken. So then all of that energy went into that product, and someone even didn't get to enjoy that. But for us, the trade-off between having this be floating in oceans and ending up in landfills and not necessarily having all of that infinite reusability and recyclability like we discussed pushed us in the direction to make this decision that we made today. But there also has been an interesting journey for us on wanting to be a plastic-free brand, and a decision that we had to make in order to support our retail partners, and that was in the choosing of the seal on the
seal
outside
saga.
of the jar. So the initial seal that we chose was made from upcycled wood pulp, so FSC certified wood pulp. It was a byproduct. It's kind of like a silicone sort of like ring that you would put on and would seal around the jar. Shaneef has one in his hand right now that's the white version of that. And that's what we started off with when we first launched, because we were like, we want to be 100% plastic free. Let's make all of these decisions. And that decision was expensive. They were expensive for each seal. They only came from a few suppliers in the United States. And then the supply chain was not consistent.
Right.
So we were getting some that were clear, some that were white, and then we couldn't get them.
Right.
And so in order to sell in a lot of retail partners, you have to have tamper-proof lids.
And after this, we experimented with something that looked more aesthetic.
Yeah.
That was kind of a tab, but we
Was it-
experienced issues with that in retail partners because there's no testers out there. And people want to smell the product, they want to get familiar with it. So we're seeing a lot of bottles being opened in store. So we had to make a different decision after that.
Yeah, so now the decision that we've had to make based on being able to meet our manufacturers' requirements and our retailer requirements is an actual like plastic small ring around the outside of the jar. So even wanting to make those decisions and wanting to be plastic free, sometimes that's not always available to you based on like supply
Right.
chain, based on cost, and in this case also based on what our retailers need. So we no longer claim to be 100% plastic free because of that ring, and so that's where you see that show up currently in our packaging choices. So a tiny bit of a trade-off to be able to still offer the glass and aluminum to our customers.
Which is interesting that, the one piece that's not recyclable that makes us not be able to say we're plastic free, but we use minimal plastic is that simple seal. But we've also taken time painstakingly to choose the right labels, non-toxic ink. All of that can be recycled.
Absolutely.
But it's just it's that protection piece that takes it from being a plastic free company to minimal plastic used.
Exactly. Yeah, and in the grand scheme of things, it's probably less than 2% of everything that we, spend on packaging or on the ingredients, etc. But it still is something that's very visible to the
Right.
customer. So we wanted to be honest and transparent about that, because initially we were telling them that it was made from something different. And so when we made that switch, we had updated that information on our website and to our retail partners, just so that we were making sure that we were being honest about the journey and where we were at and what they were currently taking home with them.
Right. We're talking about what we can do with the packaging, but from a founder's perspective or a brand perspective, you've hit on a few of them. The cost of glass, but what else goes into the consideration of packaging that keeps you up at night?
You talked about it from like the cost perspective. So just to give people an example, to have something in a glass jar is probably 10 to 20 times more expensive than if you were to have that in like even a nice quality plastic equivalent. So there's that. So we have the cost of it. There's also thinking about the supply chain side of it, like where's the glass coming from? A lot of glass is made overseas. So you have a lot of glass coming from China, coming from India. The glass that's being made and produced in North America is even like add another 10%
Right.
on top of that, or recycled glass. So trying to get to the place where we have the best suppliers with the most amount of transparency into where the packaging is coming from. And as mentioned earlier, using recycled aluminum lids versus using virgin aluminum lids. And so when we're working with our manufacturing partner, we have to constantly be on top of that, like, because supply chain shifts and change and tariffs happen. Believe it or not, there are very few people in Canada that actually even make a aluminum lid. So all the aluminum that we produce here ends up going down to the US or overseas, particularly China, who has the little tools and dies to make these.
Right.
So when we think about all the kind of stuff going on right now in the Canadian landscape, like even if we wanted to buy lids made here
It's
from
not available.
Ontario, it's impossible because the industry's not existed. So those aren't things that necessarily keep me up at night, but have me thinking like, how could the supply chain be different if there was more of a demand for some of these materials here on a local level? I think for me, it's like thinking about what's next. Like, what is the next innovation for us? And we're kind of seeing two different things happen in the skincare space. We're seeing a really cool move towards like nature-led solutions. So we're seeing mycelium packaging, so stuff made from mushrooms. We're seeing stuff that's made from jackfruit and all these other materials. The question is, how will it sort of behave when you have a cream in it that's meant to stay in there for the shelf life of the product?
Yeah.
And being a small skincare company, it's really hard for us to test that innovation. So kind of sitting around and watching what's happening is a position we're in right now. And as soon as these things become more affordable on the marketplace, being able to kind of transition to a completely nature-led solution that breaks down in a home compost in 30 days is the stuff that I get more excited about versus trying to focus so much on like what keeps me up at night. I try to focus on like the where are we going and what's exciting and interesting out there.
For me, it's where the spreadsheets meet our values. Because like you said, it could be 10x times the price in the choice we've made to use glass, and it doesn't look good on a spreadsheet. But our values are strong and we have to balance that. And sometimes spreadsheets and values do not align. So looking at it from that cost perspective, there are heavy decisions that need to be made.
I do lie. There is something that does keep me up at night. And it's not something that we're doing at Planted, but the trend that we're seeing around this crazy packaging where you've got like, you turn the product and it twists and it comes out.
I know what you mean.
You don't have like, it's called a sanitation pump, so your hands never touch the product. So you've got very, very complex materials all combined to make this sort of action happen. And 90% of the time, those things cannot be recycled because it's
layered.
a tube within a tube within a tube within a thing. And why is it that we don't think that putting your own finger in your own jar in your own bathroom is sanitary, or why we need the product to flip and twirl and come out on our hands in a certain way? And people are paying a lot of money for these types of innovations.
But how much product are you really also, how much product are you getting in that small container because of all of the technology or innovation to make it hands-free? You're not getting as much product.
No, not the full size. If it says 30 mils, but yet it's the size of a 250 mil jar, thinking about asking yourself about all of those additional materials just so that you can have something that is convenient for you, but certainly not something that's convenient for the planet.
While the easiest thing is wash your hands, dip your hand into the jar, and apply it onto your skin. That would be the easiest way to use it.
So what else are you seeing out there in the space that's either interesting to you or you're like, I wonder if we're going to go there next?
I'm seeing a lot of refilleries or refillery type of stores. One just opened up in Falls Creek recently. And I've been to a couple where you just bring your jars and you can fill your daily essentials, whether it's flour, cereal, soaps, everything can be filled. But for me, the question that really comes to mind is it the right thing? Are we creating something new out of this that isn't being answered through recycling, or is refilling the answer?
Well, in terms of refilling for everyday items, like you've got your jar, as we mentioned, and you're going to go down and fill it up with your dish soap and bring it back and all that stuff. Yeah, that makes total sense. If you have one in your neighborhood and it's got the products that you want and you need, they're generally choosing really high quality things, but that's a very localized solution.
And very niched.
Yeah, I think it's still pretty niche because my understanding is very expensive to run those types of stores. We've seen a couple in Vancouver that have opened and closed because of just the cost of rent and real estate and all of those things. You really need to have that local community really be into that as a solution for them for those particular products. But what we're seeing in terms of another form of refill is people creating pouches. So you would have like a pouch that you would put, say, 500 milliliters or a liter in, and then that would be what you take home to either fill up your plastic container that you're already using from that same brand or your jar, etc. And in some spaces, there's people having really good success with that. Generally, the pouches themselves are plastic. So the ones that are being made with other things that aren't just plastic still have a plastic liner. So there is a ways to go there. There's some exciting stuff happening with seaweed in the future that could be a solution for us. And so about 2 years ago, we did receive sort of a compostable, biodegradable pouch, and then we put our cream in it and kind of just set it on my desk, and about 9 months later it started leaching out. And it's
so you didn't even make the 12 months of once you open you can use that product.
Exactly. So then that was just not a viable option for where sort of the innovation is right now. But maybe if that changes and then we ask our customers and they're like, I'd absolutely love to get a 500 mil or a 1 liter and refill the jars that I have at home, we might look at that for a solution. But I find those solutions work really well with high volume things like dish soap or laundry soap or stuff that you're using on a daily basis in higher quantities than potentially a skincare product. But we're always open to revisiting that. But that was kind of what happened when we did an initial trial a couple years ago.
And I feel when it comes to refilling, questions like will it leak? Will the material leach into the product itself? Where glass, that doesn't happen. Those also come up for me as well.
Yeah,
and also, will the pouch break, tear, explode in transport, in travel? I travel a lot, so I will decant into smaller, but I tend to use glass or I'll tend to use silicone. That's something that I can use over and over again. But the question for me would be how safe is it to use a pouch like that, and how long will it last? And you've tested it; it lasts 9 months for us.
Okay, so the next thing we want to kind of chat with everyone about is samples. So bringing it back to those single-use items that we know are making up the majority of that 120 billion units that end up being produced by the cosmetics industry annually. And these can come in the forms of like skincare samples, hair care samples, beauty masks, those type of things that are generally in sort of like things that look like this, these little tiny kind of like either metal or plastic type containers.
Aren't those recyclable?
They're not, because there isn't really a system to catch them. They don't even actually have like the number of plastic that it is on them. So this is a lot of the stuff that we see ending up in the environment, which
and this is the kind of stuff we also see ending up in our waterways, right? Like this ends up in the surf. This ends up in so many different places where it shouldn't be.
Exactly, because they're generally multi-material. They're usually like one material on the outside, and then they'll have a liner on the inside that might be foil, it might be plastic, it might be otherwise. So they're often a mixed material as well.
But we have samples at Planted, and we did something different.
We did. So it took us a while to find this sample. I was actually inspired by Dr. Bronner's, was how I got onto this company in the States called Exlapac. And so what they do is they produce samples in various types of materials, but we were able to choose a material that was going to be both biodegradable and compostable in your home compost and things like that after the fact. And so you can just see our little sample here, and then you can tear it off, and then it's also resealable on the top. So if you don't use the whole 10 mils that's in the product, you can reseal it, pop it in your desk, pop it in your bag, and it's not going to leak everywhere. With something like this, there's not an option to kind of reseal. So even if you didn't use all the product, you're kind of maybe even throwing this out as well as some unused product.
Right.
And then the other I guess the thing with this that's the trade-off is that you have to do a minimum of 20,000 samples.
And the cost of each sample is
the cost of each sample
20x regular.
Is quite high, but we wanted to make sure that when our customers were having that brand experience and receiving a sample from us, it spoke to the same values as what they see when they purchase a full-size product. So again, for a small brand, this can be very cost prohibitive. So that's why we only ended up going with our number one selling scent at the time, Vacay. And then also, how do you get through those amount of samples in enough time so that you still have the shelf life on the product for the customer to use? So you can see that even though you wanted to choose the right material, the right partner, then you're looking at a quantities game and all of these other things on top of that then yes, makes your sample be that much more expensive, but it also is, again, like, what other option do you have is having something that you outright know is going to end up in landfill or oceans and otherwise.
And making it even more complex is the current retail landscape, right? Like if you go into any store, it's not like pre-pandemic where you would get samples, you would be able to test. Testers have been removed off the shop floor. So if a customer is trying to discover a new brand and they're not familiar with it, the cost increases on our side because we have to figure out how do we get samples in their hands. If a simple idea, which happened before, was open up a jar, customers try it, you write that off to testers. But if that's not that option isn't available, now to get the product into a customer's hands, there's more cost that consumers don't necessarily see.
Yeah, that's true. And in some ways, they probably shouldn't have to. Really, it's a brand and retailer responsibility to create that customer experience. But I think they don't necessarily, have that level of understanding of why does this brand readily have all these samples available where maybe this other one does not. And then ultimately, that potentially means that they're going to choose another product over yours. And I do think COVID played a big role in that, as we mentioned earlier. Like most stores you could go into, they would have testers and little popsicle sticks, and they'd fill a little jar for you to kind of take away. So we're also dealing with sort of like riding the wave of not having products be available from like that sanitary perspective, not wanting to put your hands in something that someone else might have used on the shelf. And then ultimately it just becomes a lot for people in these spaces to manage. And we know in a lot of retail locations that staff has actually decreased. Like it's not kind of come back after COVID. Like I think we still, as an example, you bag your own groceries and you just take them away now. Like that's just a thing that we all do. And we see that same, and that again, I'm not like saying anything about like retailers that are doing that, but we just see like once we've kind of taken away that service, you've not sort of seen that come
You're
back.
not returning back to it.
Yeah, unless you go into a place that really highly specializes in particular skincare, that dermatological stuff where they really need to have that sample to test it on your skin, etc. But yeah, for most of our retailers, sampling can be challenging. And then for us, that put that question back on us as to, well, what are we going to do about that to make it easy for them, but also to live up to our packaging brand standards. So in putting out all of these kind of like challenges that we see and face in the packaging space as a brand, like what might be some things that consumers could do at home?
Okay, good question. I think most of us have some sort of a recycling setup in our kitchen, but some not in our bathrooms. So a simple thing that customers can do is simply take something small, leave it on your counter, and anything that needs to be recycled, instead of putting it into the trash bin, sort it into here. Just make sure that you separate the components based on your local program so that it goes in the right bin afterwards.
That's a good idea, because I think a lot of people do take pride in like displaying stuff in their bathroom,
Right.
particularly like the brands of the products that they really like. And if you don't have that easy way to recycle it when you're down to that last little bit, it can feel easy just to throw it in the bin. So just having that option next to you under the sink or on your counter is probably a good way to kind of just remind people of like, hey, can I reuse this, or does this really
Right.
need to go in here, or can I give that product an afterlife?
It keeps the clutter down, but also there's some that reward you for bringing things back. So in that way, keeping it separate, you get your deposit back, and it stays out of the landfill.
Exactly. And I think the other thing to discuss is it's not just on the consumer to do their part, and it shouldn't be on the consumer to do their part. We see
Right.
this not just in the cosmetics industry, but across recycling in general. Like, we're not going to recycle our way out of the current situation that we're in with the waste that we see ending up in landfill and in our environment.
Unless there is change in policy, or there's change in how things are made and how government regulates, then it feels like a lot like you're running an uphill battle as a consumer. So the solution is a systemic solution rather than an individual.
Absolutely, and I think there's a lot of places across, Canada and the U.S. that have good infrastructure for recycling,
Right.
but there's certainly communities that don't.
Yeah.
Like, not every community even recycles glass anymore in
Right.
this country anyways, because they just don't have the volume or the infrastructure to do things at that kind of localized level. We're no longer able to ship the massive amounts of stuff that we were sending over to Asia for recycling.
Right.
We haven't fixed those parts of the infrastructure here, so there is, to your point, there is a role for government to play in terms of like thinking through how to legislate what ends up in the environment. There's a role for companies to play in thinking about, can I make this in a material that can be recycled and reused locally in the first place? Like,
Right.
why is it that we're able to buy all of these products in packaging that we know can't be recycled here locally? And then the last kind of piece of that, and probably the smallest role to play, should be the consumer. But I think we've done a really good job of making it feel like that the consumer should have this big role to play, and that recycling really is this way that we're going to kind of get out of the situation that we're in with all the waste that's being accumulated, not just in our industry, but what we're seeing across the board.
And by way of an example of what governments are doing, for example, in Kenya, single-use plastic is bad. There's no plastic bags allowed, and it's the fiber fiber shopping bags that are now in system. If a company produces it, they pay the tax on it, and they have to have their name on the label. But even when I was traveling, I was warned not to bring Ziploc bags, because if they open up your bag in customs, you could be fined. That's how they're dealing with plastics in their system. But what you said really struck a chord with me around, if we don't have the infrastructure in our country, should those products or those components be allowed as part of the production?
Yeah, I think we'd probably be shocked at how staggering the amount of products is that are purchased and consumed here that don't have any kind of solution for the packaging that they arrived in. So that's definitely probably something bigger than for us to solve today. But we did want to kind of spend a little bit of time checking your recycling knowledge and having this also be something that consumers can kind of like learn from as we kind of go through some of the things that Shaneef and I found in our bathroom cupboards.
And it's not about doing things perfectly. It's just about doing things better than we have been. So yeah, using our own products. Let's get started.
All right, Shaneef, are you ready to play Bin It, Bring It, or Give It Another Life?
Let's give it a shot.
Let's give it a go. So as mentioned, I have a little shoebox here that I have decided to give it another life, and it's really cute. It says, please reuse me for storage or playtime before recycling me. And when you open it up, it has all these cute little images that your kid could draw or play with. Yeah, I thought I'd just bring this as an example of a company that my kids' shoes come in that we've reused.
And it saves your walls.
And it's we will see about that. Okay, so the first one, planted jar.
Okay, this I hope I get. So separate the components, because now, at least in my area, the glass has to go into a blue bin. The glass goes into a gray bin, and the aluminum goes into a blue bin.
Okay, is that the only option for that jar?
Hopefully not. The first thing I would do is wash it. Whisper lovingly to it. Thank you. Put it in the dishwasher and then use it for spices, paper clips, hair ties, anything storage. Even customers have shared with us on our social channels how they reuse our jars. You could use it to plant succulents or small plants as well.
Okay, we'll let him pass with that. So it's a reuse or it's a recycle with putting components in the proper bin. Okay, next up, something else that is glass. So this is a glass perfume bottle that has a metal cap and a plastic stem inside.
Okay, so because of the different components, I would say the glass is recyclable, but I'm not sure about the top. And since it can't be removed, I would say bin it. Okay.
You were almost there. So you actually can remove this with a set of pliers. So be careful if you do it. So you can take the metal off, but because the metal also has a little bit of plastic inside, unfortunately the cap and the plastic straw are meant for the garbage, but you can definitely put the glass into a recycle bin if you have that.
Perfect. For now, we'll throw it in here.
Nail polish. Glass bottle, plastic top.
Well, here we have products inside that could be hazardous. So, and there's also components like the brush that I'm not sure is recyclable. So I would say, again, this is a bin it situation.
It is definitely a bin it situation, but not your regular bin at home. So Shaneef is right. Most nail polishes contain hazardous materials, so you actually need to treat them like you would paint. So you can't just throw them in the bin. And whenever I hear that or think about that, I just think about how many nail bars there are, how many times people just choose one nail color for one night out on the town, and then it's just sitting there accumulating, and then eventually you clean your bathroom out and throw them in the garbage. Well, that's not the right solution, is to put them in the garbage. Maybe you can share those polishes amongst other friends and reuse them a little bit more, because they do obviously have a shelf life in terms of the material inside. But yeah, unfortunately for most nail products, it is to the recycling depot for the hazardous recycling. There is some companies that are doing sort of like plant-based nail polishes and things like that out there, so I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I don't know that people would recognize the difference between the two if they were going through some kind of a recycling system. But yeah, that is one that unfortunately has to go to your recycling depot.
Okay.
Ooh, here's my guilty pleasure. This is my mascara.
All right, so what's written on the bottom? Again, I think there's a recycling symbol. Nope, there's nothing. I don't know, because there's different numbers to plastics. I know we have 1 to 5 in Canada, but it goes higher. So without knowing or seeing the number, I would not want to put it into recycling to introduce something into the system. So I would say bin it.
Yes, unfortunately that is accurate. So again, every mascara tube that was probably ever made, similar to pieces of plastic, exists somewhere in our environment today, and that's because of the contamination. It's very, very difficult to try to get that mascara off the inside, and then you have a brush that's going to have different components as well, so you've got mixed material, and then you also have the situation where you're not probably able to separate that, so you've got a contamination issue. So I don't know what I might have to do about that in the long term. I know there are people that are making sort of like, you know, coal and stuff like that are like you can pat on and things like that. But in terms of like most traditional mascaras in a tube with a wand, unfortunately, garbage is their destination.
Sounds like something for product development to come up with.
Maybe. Okay, so let's move on to this guy. I see what looks like an aluminum tube.
All right, so it's aluminum. There is a label on the bottom which says it's recyclable. So I don't know about the label. I would remove the label. There's no label on the unit itself. So barring just the label, everything else is recyclable because it's aluminum.
Exactly. And I'd say that's a good choice. And we're starting to see lots of like refillable things come in aluminum tins, like powdered deodorants that you pat on and things like that. So certainly that would probably be a very good product choice so that you have it for its lifespan and then you don't have to feel guilty about not reusing it and recycling it because we already know that aluminum is a highly recycled material. Yeah. So keeping on the aluminum train, I have a can of hairspray.
All right, I think I learned from the nail polish. So this is hazardous. And there is a warning on the front itself. So I would want to say that if this is recyclable, except that you'd have to make sure that it's completely empty. And if there's any product in it, it would make it unrecyclable.
That's exactly right here in BC. So in BC, we've made it possible to recycle aerosols. You have to make sure for things that are flammable, which is really the case with things that are compressed like that, the risk of explosion, that you do make sure they're completely empty. If not, you're in a situation where you're taking it to the depot, just like with the situation around the nail polish.
Good to know.
One last example here for everyone, because this is actually something that we're going to discover together that Shaneef has brought in. So talk me through this product and your thoughts around its end-of-life use for the packaging.
So it's toothpaste, and I moved from a tube to this, or explored this, because I had learned that toothpaste tubes cannot be recycled and they just stay in the landfill.
That's exactly right.
I decided to try something different, and this is in a container. It is a pump. They do have a recycling label on it, but there's layers of plastic. So there's that thin plastic, which in my municipality cannot go into the bins. I actually have to take it to a sorting facility. So I have a separate bin at home. When I go to Costco and I do all of those, all of the packaging on the packaging goes in there.
Right.
And then I have to drop it off. So I'm thinking that the outside layer would go with the thin plastics. Again, the part that I'm not sure about, Tricia, is if it doesn't have a recycling symbol on it, is that item recyclable or not?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think it depends on your municipality. I don't know the answer is if it doesn't have it. In BC, the most highly recycled is number ones and number twos. And I think the rule of thumb is like the higher the number, the harder it is to recycle. So when you have things that are like number 8, number 7, and they're like colored plastic, so like blue, black, pink, think about all of the products that you have around you that are made from that color, and it's very, very minimal. So there wouldn't actually be a huge infrastructure around that one particular item. So that's how people that I know that are much smarter than me in the recycling space taught me to think about it, is the higher the number, the least recyclable, and the more unique the color, or maybe potentially like the combination of things making up that material. Like we discussed, there's a spritz, there's a metal, there's a this, there's a that. So the simpler that packaging can be, and the closer to a natural material the packaging can be, the highly likelihood that you can reuse it or recycle it.
Right.
So this one will maybe have to phone in a friend and ask. So I can't answer this question for you today, Shaneef, but when you get to the end of life, report back on the experience.
Will do, because I'm thinking it's going to be in the bin because I can't undo the pieces, but I haven't taken pliers to it yet.
Okay.
So I'll let you know.
Okay, be careful. So we don't want to leave just on sort of a note of you now discovering how many things that you have in your bathroom that potentially cannot be reused or recycled and have to have their end of life be in a landfill. We want to talk about a couple of things that you could look out for the next time that you're purchasing things that may fall under single use, that you may, just by making this one switch, save yourself hundreds of items from going into the landfill every year. So before we wrap up today, it would be great for you to kind of share a little bit about some of the things that you're doing to eliminate some of those single-use items in your life, and also stuff that you're doing that kind of supports your kind of lifestyle, and how you can have the products that you love on you, that it's convenient, but you've not had to purchase sort of a smaller size or something like that to do that.
Okay, so I'll start with a quick switch that we can make, or that I've made, and it's the cotton pads. And there's different things we could use. And those, something as simple as reusable pads that come in a wash bag.
That's
so
cool.
Once you use it, you just put it in the laundry, but put it in that bag so it doesn't mix, doesn't get lost in your laundry with the socks.
Wrong, and I also chose white ones. So then after removing your makeup a couple times and then washing it, it just looked really unappealing to be putting on my face at night. So I like the idea of there being a darker version, as well as something to put it in the wash with, so it doesn't end up all crunchy in the end.
And over time, you're actually going to save money, because you're not purchasing single-use pads. You're just washing what you already have.
Yeah, and I would say that there are different versions of these. You have some that are made from bamboo and cotton, some that are made from bamboo, some that are made from organic cotton. So they do exist in many forms, and you would assume, yes, organic cotton would be better than not, but think about whether that organic cotton could be used for something else, like making a t-shirt or a bag, or something that someone's going to use continuously versus something that you're going to use on your face for 5 minutes and throw away. So there's a better use for some of these materials than for a single-use application as part of your skincare routine.
And I like that you highlighted that. It's not the product itself, it's that it's designed for single use. Speaking of which, another thing that I've recently switched to is my deodorant. So I can't use anything that has baking soda in it, and I don't use anything that has aluminum in it. So my choices are limited. I found a Canadian brand, and what they do is interesting. Is yes, it's made out of plastic, but it's post-consumer recycled plastic, and then you just get the deodorant that's refillable. So once it's finished, pop in a new one, and that way I don't have to feel guilty, because this is something that I continuously use. It's not throwing it out like drugstore brand deodorants.
That's really cool, because again, we're not saying that we're haters on all things made out of plastic, like just to kind of come back to that again, but it's just really thinking through the lifespan and the longevity of and the use of it. And then again, this is something that you're going to use over and over, and then they send you the refill in what looks like really nice packaging and paper that can be much more easily recycled than another tube of plastic.
Yeah, and even if you open it, like the way that they package, that consideration goes right down to how the deodorant itself is wrapped. It's not plastic, it's paper.
That's nice.
So
this is a good job. We'll give you a thumbs up.
Thank you.
Okay, and so what about, we were talking a little bit about like smaller jars earlier, and some went into recycle, some got separated, but I see you've got a couple jars here that look like they've been well used.
So I travel a lot, and when I travel, I like to have what I use in my routine. That's what I want to take with me, but I do not like buying smaller jars, because I'm paying a lot more, and if I use 100 ml, I'm now adding something into recycling that may or may not get recycled. So what I've done is I've actually purchased glass, and if I'm going on a short trip, I will just decant into this one. But also something that with my last trip that I discovered is a lot of the airports have removed the 100 ml or the 1 liter requirement for your check-in, for your carry-on. And I'm somebody that, even if I'm going for 2 weeks, I'll try and travel just with check-in, so that I don't with carry-on, so I don't have to check my bag in. But now, with London especially, so I learned this in London, you don't have to take your liquids out, and you can put full size in. It's up to 2 liters now that their limit is. So that way, if I don't have to decant, I'll just take what I need with me. Or I have glass containers where what I need for that period will just go in there.
Fantastic. So I hope that everyone out there got some interesting insight into the world of packaging as it sits in terms of our industry at a global level. We've shared with you some of the challenges that we face as business owners making decision here at Planted, and how we're trying to consider all of those things so that you end up with not only a quality product that you're going to love on your skin, but you have packaging that in the end you can either reuse or recycle in most places across Canada and the United States. And then we're curious how everyone's going to do if you do your own sort of game of whether or not you're going to be able to recycle it at home, bring it to a depot, or reuse it and give it another life. We'd love to hear from you related to maybe your challenges or even how you're upcycling and using your Planted jars at home. And thank you, Shaneef, for sharing a little bit about some of the things that you're doing to help remove some of the single-use items that were going into your waste stream at home.
Yeah, thanks, Tricia. This was a fun conversation.
Fantastic. So thank you all so much, and we'll be coming back to you with something very special for episode 4.
Ooh.